The rain came down in sheets, pounding against the windshield like it wanted to break through. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked under my palms. The coastal highway outside Portland was almost empty at this hour. Just the black road, the white lines, and the endless rain. I drove fast, too fast. The speedometer climbed as the tears blurred my vision worse than the storm outside. At 2:17 am. I had been standing alone in the glass conference room of the company I built from nothing. 8 years of my life. 8 years of 70-hour weeks, missed birthdays, and sacrificed weekends. All of it reflected back at me from that cold laptop screen. An email, sent from my own account. I never wrote it. I never signed it. Yet there it was. Clean, professional, and deadly. Official transfer of founding shares. Effective immediately. 100% of my founder equity transferred to Grant Caldwell, my wife's brother, and to Marcus Hale, the man who had been my best friend since college. In 48 hours, the company I poured my soul into had been taken from me. The stock price crashed. Investors fled. Online, the story was already spreading. Kai Whitaker, the greedy founder who abandoned his own team right before the biggest round of funding, and Lena, my wife, stood right beside them. She looked straight into the camera during the emergency board meeting and said, with perfect calm, "Sometimes people change. Kai chose his own path. We have to move forward as a family." Her voice never wavered, not even once. I thought family and best friends were the one place you could always feel safe. Turns out, they were the sharpest knife you could ever get stabbed with. The engine roared as I pushed the car even harder through the rain. Water streamed down the windows like tears I couldn't stop. I whispered through clenched teeth, my voice raw and broken. "They just killed me, but they don't know. I'm still breathing." By the time I reached the edge of town, my whole body was shaking. I pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel with a flickering neon sign that read, "Vacancy." The rain continued to hammer the roof of the car as I sat there, staring at nothing. How did it happen so fast? Just yesterday morning, I had walked into the office like any other day. By afternoon, security was escorting me out. My key card no longer worked. My name had already been removed from the founder plaque in the lobby. Employees I had hired, trained, and fought for looked away when I tried to speak to them. Some even whispered behind my back as I left the building for the last time. That night, I lost more than the company. I lost the house Lena and I had built together. The bank accounts were frozen. The friends I thought were real stopped answering my calls. Even my own sister sent a short message saying she needed time to process everything. I sat in that cheap motel room for hours, the sound of rain drumming against the window. My mind kept replaying the same moments on loop. Lena kissing me goodnight just last week, her hand gentle on my cheek. Marcus laughing at my jokes during our weekly strategy meetings. Grant clapping me on the back, calling me brother like he actually meant it. How long had they been planning this? How many nights had they smiled at me while sharpening the knife? The anger came first, hot and blinding. Then the pain, deep, crushing. The kind that makes it hard to breathe. For a while, I just sat on the edge of the stiff motel bed, head in my hands, wondering if this was really happening. I had given everything to that company, to that marriage, to those friendships, and in one night, they erased me. But somewhere, beneath the shock and the rage and the suffocating sadness, a small, cold light flickered to life. They thought I was finished. They thought they had buried me so deep I would never climb out. They were wrong. I wasn't dead. I was only lying still, watching them celebrate on what they believed was my grave. And in that silence, something dangerous began to grow inside me. One day, they would understand exactly how much they had underestimated me. The salt air never left my clothes. I had traded the cheap motel for a small, damp apartment 2 blocks from the ocean. The walls were thin, the carpet smelled of mildew, and every night the waves crashed against the rocks like they were trying to tear the whole coast apart. It felt right. Everything inside me already felt broken anyway. During the day, I took whatever work I could get fixing broken code for local shops, building simple websites for restaurants that paid in cash. I kept my head down and my mouth shut. No one asked questions. No one cared who I used to be. But when darkness fell and the town grew quiet, the real work began. I sat at a wobbly wooden table under a single bare bulb, the glow of my laptop, the only light in the room. Night after night, I dug through old files I had managed to save before they cut me off completely. Emails, bank statements, internal transaction logs, every bit of data I had once trusted Marcus and Grant with. Each new discovery landed like a slow punch to the gut. They had used my name to authorize transfers I never approved. Layer after layer of fake vendor payments, all routed through shell companies. The numbers were clean on the surface, but the dirt ran deep. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moved offshore while I was still signing payroll for our team. And then I found Lena's signature. Not hers. A forgery. The curve of the L was too sharp, the pressure on the pen just slightly off. She had practiced it. She had sat somewhere, maybe at the kitchen island we picked out together, and copied my wife's name until it looked real enough to fool the lawyers. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. My chest tightened so hard, I had to stand up and walk to the window. The cold glass fogged under my breath. Outside, the ocean was black and restless under the moonlight. Why? The question kept circling like a shark. Why did the woman who once fell asleep on my shoulder during late-night coding sessions help erase me so easily? Why did Marcus, the man who cried when we closed our first big deal, smile while driving the knife in? Why did Grant look me in the eye and call me brother, while planning to take everything I built? Some nights the pain became unbearable. I would slam the laptop shut and pace the tiny living room, heart pounding, breath shallow. Tears came without warning. Not the loud kind, the quiet, shaking kind that made my shoulders tremble. I kept asking the empty room the same broken question. How could the people I loved the most throw me away like I was nothing? There were moments I wanted to drive back to the city right then, to stand in front of them and scream until my voice gave out, to make them feel even a fraction of what they had done to me. But I didn't. Instead, I sat back down, opened the laptop again, and kept digging. Silent, methodical, like a wounded animal that had learned to stop bleeding in public. One cold Tuesday evening, a heavy knock sounded at my door. I froze. My pulse jumped. No one was supposed to know I lived here. I opened the door just a crack. A tall, weathered man in his late 50s stood under the dim porch light, rain dripping from his jacket. His eyes were sharp but carried something close to understanding. "Kai Whitaker?" he said quietly. "Brock Finley. I did some investigation work for your company back when it was still yours. Mind if I come in?" He didn't wait for a full answer. He stepped inside, set a thick envelope on the table, and looked around the bare apartment without judgment. "I've seen what they did to you," he said, voice low and steady. "Doesn't sit right with me. Thought you might want a few real pieces of the puzzle." Over the next hour, Brock showed me documents I hadn't found yet, timestamps that didn't match, hidden payment trails, patterns that screamed fraud. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't pat me on the back. Before he left, he paused at the door and looked me dead in the eye. "Listen, son, revenge with a gun just turns you into the criminal, but revenge with your mind, that makes them build their own coffin." His words lingered long after his truck disappeared down the wet street. Then came the message that truly shook me. It arrived late one night on a secure, anonymous account I had created. No name, no signature, just a short line. "They're moving faster than you think. Watch your back. Some of us still remember what you built." Someone who used to carry a badge. Sloane Mercer, the former prosecutor, the woman who now worked as legal counsel for Grant and Marcus. I sat staring at the screen for nearly 20 minutes, heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me wanted to reply immediately. Another part, the scared, betrayed part, whispered that this could be another trap, another way to finish what they started. I didn't answer. Instead, I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the waves outside. The anger was still there. The hurt still cut deep every single day, but something else was growing quietly beneath it all. Colder, clearer, more patient. I was no longer just the broken man they had thrown away. I was becoming something sharper, like a snake that had been stepped on hard. I had coiled tight in the shadows, and I could feel the strike slowly building inside me. The days blurred into a quiet rhythm I almost hated. By morning, I was just another freelance coder in a small Oregon coastal town. I sat in coffee shops with bad Wi-Fi, fixing bugs for local businesses, building basic inventory systems for bait shops and tourist gift stores. I smiled politely when people asked my name. I never told them the full story, but when the sun dropped behind the pines and the fog rolled in from the ocean, I became someone else entirely. I returned to the damp apartment, locked the door, and opened the second laptop, the one Brock Finley had quietly helped me set up. Under the weak yellow light of the desk lamp, I began building something invisible, a private digital tracking system, small scripts, silent monitors, backdoors into old company servers that still carried traces of my original access. Brock came by twice a week, always after dark, always careful. He never stayed long. He would slide a new USB drive across the table or whisper fresh findings while the waves crashed outside. One night he brought the heaviest piece yet. "Grant and Marcus didn't just steal your company," he said, voice low. "They used it as a laundry machine, fake contracts with overseas suppliers, shell companies in Singapore and Panama. Millions moved through your old firm while you were still signing the paychecks." I stared at the documents he spread out. Clean numbers on paper, dirty money underneath. My name had been attached to several of those contracts, a perfect shield. My stomach turned. I leaned back in the chair, the old wood creaking under me. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The betrayal I thought I had already measured suddenly felt deeper, wider, colder. Then Brock dropped the final fragment. "And Lena," he paused, watching my face carefully. "She's pregnant, 3 months along. The father is Marcus." The room went silent except for the distant roar of the ocean. I felt the words hit me like a slow wave pulling sand from under my feet. Pregnant. With Marcus, the man who used to sit across from me at strategy meetings, laughing about our future, the woman who once told me she wasn't ready for kids because we needed to focus on the company first. All those nights she came home late. All those times she said she was handling family stuff with her brother. I stood up suddenly, walked to the window, and pressed my forehead against the cold glass. My breath fogged the pain. A sharp pain bloomed behind my ribs, not just anger anymore, but something raw and personal that made my hands shake. How many times had I held her and believed we were building a life together? I didn't cry. Not that night. The tears had dried up weeks ago. What replaced them was something colder, harder. A quiet, calculating stillness that scared me more than the rage ever had. I was no longer drowning in the pain. I was learning to breathe in it. A few nights later, another message arrived. Encrypted, untraceable, sent to the secure account only Brock and I knew about. The text was short, but every word carried weight. "They're getting nervous. Grant wants to clean house completely. If you don't disappear soon, they will make sure you do permanently. Be careful who you trust. Someone who still believes in what you built. Sloane Mercer." The former prosecutor turned legal counsel for the very people destroying me. I read the message 3 times, heart pounding against my ribs. My finger hovered over the reply button. Part of me wanted to trust her, the old prosecutor who once stood for something real. Another part, the wounded animal inside, screamed that this was another trap, another elegant way to finish what Lena, Grant, and Marcus had started. Why would she warn me? What did she have to gain? I closed the laptop without replying and sat in total darkness, listening to the wind rattle the window frames. The pain was still there, sharp and familiar. The memories of Lena's smile, Marcus's handshake, Grant's fake warmth, they still cut deep when I let them. But now something else moved alongside the hurt. A patient, ice-cold focus. I was done simply surviving. I was starting to prepare, Like a wounded wolf that had retreated into the shadows to lick its wounds, I could feel my strength returning in silence. The cracks in their alliance were beginning to show greed, turning them against each other, secrets threatening to spill, and I was quietly collecting every tool I would need when the time came to strike. The hunt had not begun yet, but the waiting, the watching, was sharpening something dangerous inside me. The fog hung thick over the coast that week, like the town itself was holding its breath. I had spent months preparing in silence. Now the time had come to move. Late one night, sitting in the dim glow of my apartment, I took a slow, deep breath and pressed send. Anonymous drops hit several underground tech forums. First, carefully redacted, but damning documents showing fake contracts and offshore money trails. Then, through a secure federal channel Brock had helped me set up, the real evidence went to the authorities. Transaction logs, forged signatures, timestamps that proved fraud on a scale that would be impossible to ignore. There was no turning back. The next morning, I sent Lena a single text from a burner phone. Old coffee shop on the pier. 4 p.m. Come alone. You'll want to see this. She arrived exactly on time. The little seaside cafe where we used to sit for hours on weekend mornings still looked the same weathered wooden tables, the smell of fresh espresso, waves gently lapping against the pilings below. But everything else had changed. Lena walked in wearing a long coat, her face pale. She scanned the room nervously before spotting me in the corner booth. When she sat down, her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the table. I didn't speak at first. I simply slid a thin folder across the wooden surface. Inside were photocopies, clean, sharp, undeniable, bank records, wire transfers, and on the final page, her forged signature on the documents that had stolen my company and funneled dirty money through it. Lena's eyes widened the moment she saw her name. Her breath caught. Color drained from her face. "Kai," she whispered, voice cracking. "What is this?" I kept my voice low, almost gentle. "You tell me, Lena." She flipped through the pages faster and faster, her fingers shaking harder with each one. Panic flooded her eyes, real, raw panic. For the first time since that terrible night, I saw the woman I once loved, truly afraid. I never meant for it to go this far," she stammered. "Grant said it was just business. Marcus promised it would be clean. I was scared. Her voice broke. I watched her without anger, without shouting, just a deep, quiet sadness mixed with something colder. "You were carrying his child while you helped them bury me," I said softly. She looked up, tears spilling down her cheeks. The cafe noise faded around us. For a long moment, only the sound of the ocean and her uneven breathing filled the space between us. Before she could say another word, I stood up. "That's all I wanted you to see." I walked out without looking back, the salt wind hitting my face as I stepped onto the pier. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name once desperate, broken before her voice was swallowed by the waves. The fire had been lit. Within 48 hours, everything began to unravel. Grant and Marcus turned on each other almost immediately. Leaked documents appeared on internal servers. Accusations flew in frantic emails and late-night calls. Each man suspected the other of being the traitor. Their once solid alliance cracked wide open under the weight of greed and paranoia. Then came the moment no one saw coming. Sloane Mercer stepped forward. In a sealed statement to federal investigators, she revealed she had been quietly gathering evidence against Grant and Marcus for months. Her voice on the recorded deposition was steady but heavy with regret. "I couldn't live with it anymore," she said. "My conscience wouldn't let me stay silent." Her testimony became the final nail. Brock Finley stayed by my side through it all. He sat with me on the rocky beach one evening as the news broke, the sky painted in deep oranges and purples. He didn't offer empty words of comfort. He simply handed me a thermos of coffee and said, "You kept your head when most men would have lost theirs. That's rarer than you think." I stared out at the darkening ocean, feeling the weight of everything I had carried for so long. In that quiet moment, something inside me shifted. All these months, I had told myself I was doing this for revenge, to make them suffer, to take back what they stole, but sitting there with the cold wind on my face and Brock's steady presence beside me, I finally understood the deeper truth. Revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself. The man they tried to erase was still here, stronger, clearer, no longer defined by their betrayal. The fire they had started in my house had burned their own home to the ground instead. And I was finally walking out of the ashes. The storm finally broke in the quietest way possible. Federal agents moved in before dawn one Tuesday. I wasn't there to watch it happen. I stayed on the coast, sitting on the worn wooden steps of my apartment, listening to the distant sirens echo across the water like faint thunder. Grant Caldwell was taken into custody that morning, charged with money laundering and multiple counts of fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus Hale lost everything within weeks. His assets were frozen, his name dragged through every financial headline, and the threat of prison hung over him like a dark cloud he could no longer escape. Lena, she broke in silence. I heard through quiet channels that she had collapsed under the weight of it all. The pregnancy, the public shame, the realization that the life she had chosen was crumbling around her. She lost the house, the status, the future she had sacrificed everything for. The ambition that once burned so brightly in her eyes had turned into ash. I never stepped forward to speak against them in public. I never gave interviews. I simply watched from a distance as the consequences unfolded, like a man standing at the edge of a fire he no longer needed to feed. One cool afternoon, I drove past the old company building for the first time in months. The sign had changed. New leadership had taken over. The company was being restructured, and some of the original employees who had been hurt in the collapse were quietly receiving compensation. Not everything was made right, but pieces of justice were falling back into place. It felt enough. In the weeks that followed, I made a different choice. I didn't go back to building another empire. Instead, I started something smaller, quieter, and more meaningful. With Brock Finley's steady hand and Sloane Mercer's unexpected partnership, I founded a modest non-profit organization. We helped start-up founders who had been betrayed by their own partners, people who had lost everything to greed, lies, and broken trust. We offered legal guidance, emotional support, and practical tools to rebuild. Sloane, who had once walked the line between prosecutor and enabler, had changed completely. She brought her sharp mind and hard-earned conscience to every case. Brock became the quiet backbone, the man who reminded us all that loyalty still existed in the world. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the ocean, I sat at my desk and wrote a final letter. It was short, only a few lines. Lena, I don't want back what you helped take from me. I only wanted to take myself back. Guy. I sealed the envelope, dropped it in the mailbox, and never looked for a reply. The last chapter came on a clear, autumn morning. I stood alone on the rocky cliff overlooking the Pacific, the wind whipping fiercely around me. Below, the waves crashed against the jagged rocks with powerful, steady rhythm. The sky was painted in soft pinks and golds as the sun rose slowly over the horizon. I closed my eyes and let the cold sea air fill my lungs. Memories still came: Lena's laugh, Marcus's handshake, the bright early days when I believed we were building something unbreakable. The pain was still there, quieter now, but honest. It no longer controlled me. For the first time in years, a real smile touched my lips. Not forced, not bitter, just real. This story is a reminder that the deepest wounds often come from the people we trust most. But it's also proof that patience, quiet intelligence, and a stubborn sense of humanity can turn even the darkest betrayal into unexpected strength. Justice doesn't always arrive with thunder and shouting. Sometimes it arrives in silence, through careful steps taken at exactly the right moment. I opened my eyes and looked out across the endless ocean. I was no longer the man they tried to bury. I was the man who rose from the ashes on his own terms. And as the wind carried the salt spray across my face, I finally understood the most important truth of all. Never let your enemies define who you are. Let the way you stand back up define you instead. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for writing with us today. Aviso Legal. Disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.